The morning sun, or rather, the massive orange orb rose steadily over the alien jungle, casting a golden hue across the glowing plants and shimmering foliage. The team gathered around the fire pit, eating a quick breakfast while discussing their next steps. Jake sat quietly, his usual bravado replaced by a more subdued demeanor. He listened intently as Kale explained the location of the rare compound needed to fully neutralize the toxin in his system. The compound grows deep within the jungle. Kale said, its melodic voice calm but urgent. It is found near the base of the obsidian spira, towering rock formation that marks the heart of this region. Ryan frowned, glancing at the map on his wrist device. That's at least a day's journey from here, maybe longer. And we're talking about uncharted territory. Who knows what kind of dangers are out there? We don't have a choice, Emily interjected firmly. If we want to save Jake, make sure the toxin doesn't come back, we need to get that compound. Lisa nodded in agreement. Kale knows this planet better than we do. If they say it's safe enough to try, then we should trust them. Jake looked up, meeting Kale's gaze. For once, there was no trace of sarcasm or defiance in his expression. All right, he said simply. Let's do it. Ryan crossed his arms, clearly uneasy. Even if we manage to find the spire, how do we know the compound will work? What if it makes things worse? It won't, Kale replied, its tone unwavering. But hesitation will only increase the risk. Time is critical. The group fell silent, weighing the risks against the potential reward. Finally, Ryan sighed, shaking his head. But if something goes wrong, I'm blaming all of you. With that, the decision was made. They packed up their supplies quickly, ensuring they had everything they might need for the journey ahead. Food, water, medical kits, and tools were carefully distributed among the team. Kale led the way, moving with an almost supernatural grace. Through the dense underbrush, the journey to the obsidian spire was grueling. The jungle seemed determined to slow them down at every turn. Thick vines tangled around their legs, forcing them to cut through with machetes. Strange bird-like creatures screeched overhead, their cries echoing eerily through the trees. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the planet itself was testing their resolve. Jake struggled to keep up. His strength still diminished from the effects of the toxin. Emily stayed close by, offering support whenever he stumbled. Despite his earlier determination, it was clear he wasn't fully recovered yet. You okay? She asked softly, as they paused to rest beside a stream. I've been better, Jake admitted, leaning against a tree, but I'll live, at least 4. Now, Emily handed him a canteen of water, her expression concerned. Just take it slow. We're not in a race. Jake managed a weak smile. Thanks, Doc. You'd think after all this, I'd learn to listen to you the first time? Emily chuckled lightly. Better late than never, as they continued onward. The jungle grew darker and more oppressive. The bioluminescent plants dimmed, leaving large patches of shadowy terrain. Strange noises echoed around them, low growls, rustling leaves, the occasional splash of something moving through the water. Everyone stayed alert, their hands hovering near their weapons. Do you hear that? Lisa whispered suddenly. Stopping in her tracks, the group froze, listening intently. A faint clicking sound came from somewhere nearby, rhythmic and deliberate. It sounded like insects, but much louder and closer than before. Stay together, Kale instructed, its voice barely above a whisper. Whatever you do, do not separate. The clicking grew louder, accompanied by the sound of movement in the bushes. Slowly, a swarm of insect-like creatures emerged, identical to the ones that had bitten Jake days earlier. Their translucent wings shimmered in the dim light, and their glowing bodies pulsed ominously. Great, Ryan muttered, raising his weapon. Just what we needed. Don't provoke them, Kale warned sharply. They are territorial and will attack, if threatened. The swarm hovered uncertainly, seemingly studying the group. Jake instinctively reached for his own weapon, but Emily placed a firm hand on his arm. No sudden moves, she whispered. We don't want to startle them. For a tense moment, it seemed like the insects might leave them alone. Of the creatures darted forward, buzzing angrily. Ryan reacted instantly, firing a warning shot into the air. The swarm erupted into chaos, diving toward the group with startling speed. "Run!" Kale shouted, leading the way deeper into the jungle. The team sprinted after Kale, dodging trees and leaping over roots as the swarm pursued them relentlessly. Jake lagged behind, his weakened state making it harder to keep pace. Emily grabbed his arm, pulling him along as best she could. "Keep moving," she urged, her voice strained with effort. The chase lasted several minutes, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, Kale spotted a narrow crevice between two massive rocks and motioned for the group to follow. One by one, they squeezed through the gap, finding themselves in a small, hidden clearing shielded from view. The insects buzzed furiously outside the crevice, unable to fit through the narrow opening. After a few moments, they gave up and flew away, leaving the group panting and shaken. "That was too close," Lisa gasped, sinking to the ground. Ryan leaned against the rock wall, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Yeah, no kidding. Remind me never to piss off alien bugs again." Jake slid down to sit beside Emily, his face pale and exhausted. "I owe you another one," he said weakly. "You literally saved my life back there." Emily shook her head, managing a small smile. "You'd have done the same for me." Kale stepped forward, its expression unreadable. "We cannot afford such delays. The obsidian spire is still far ahead, and the toxin may begin to spread again soon."
Ow.
Jake nodded, pushing himself to his feet despite his fatigue. "Then let's keep moving. I'm not giving up now." As the day wore on, the jungle began to change. Thick vegetation thinned out, revealing jagged rocks and barren terrain. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint scent of minerals. In the distance, towering above the landscape, stood the obsidian spire, a massive black structure that gleamed like glass under the sunlight. "There it is," Kale announced, pointing toward the spire. "The compound grows at its base." The sight filled the group with renewed determination, though exhaustion weighed heavily on all of them. They pressed on, navigating the rocky terrain with careful steps. Each step brought them closer to their goal land, hopefully, to a solution for Jake's condition. When they finally reached the base of the spire, they found a cluster of strange, crystalline plants growing in the shadows. Their translucent stems glowed faintly, pulsing with an inner light. Kale knelt beside the plants, examining them closely. "This is it," Kale said, plucking one of the crystals carefully. "Crush this into powder and mix it with water. It will complete the antidote." Emily took the crystal, her hands trembling. Slightly with relief, "Thank you," she said sincerely. "We couldn't have done this without you." Kale inclined its head slightly, its expression softening. "Your survival depends on understanding this world. Perhaps this experience will teach you to respect it." Jake stepped forward, his gratitude evident despite his weariness. "Thank you, Kale. Really, I owe you my life." Kale studied him for a moment, then spoke. "Life is precious, regardless of its form. Do not waste yours recklessly." With that, Kale turned and disappeared into the jungle, leaving the group to prepare the final remedy. As Emily crushed the crystal and mixed it with water, the others gathered around, watching anxiously. "Well," Jake said, breaking the silence with a nervous grin. "Here goes nothing." He took the mixture from Emily, hesitating for just a moment before drinking it. The taste was sharp and metallic, but he forced himself to swallow. Almost immediately, he felt a warmth spreading through his body, chasing away the lingering effects of the toxin. "It's working," Emily said, her voice filled with relief. "You're going to be okay." Jake exhaled deeply, leaning back against the spire. "Never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad we listened to the alien doctor." The group laughed softly, the tension finally easing. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear, but together, they had prevailed. As they prepared to return to camp, Jake glanced back at the spire one last time. "Let's just hope we don't run into anything else weird on the way back," he joked. Ryan smirked, clapping him on the shoulder. "Knowing our luck, don't count on it." The night grew colder as the jungle's bioluminescent glow dimmed, casting long shadows across the camp. The team had settled into an uneasy silence, each member lost in their own thoughts. Jake sat alone by the edge of the clearing, staring out into the darkness. He held the vial of golden liquid loosely in one hand, turning it over and over as if trying to decide whether to trust it. Emily watched him from a distance, her concern growing with every passing minute. Inside the tent, Lisa was busy organizing supplies, her movements quick and deliberate. She glanced up occasionally, her eyes darting toward Jake, before returning to her task. Ryan, meanwhile, leaned against a crate, scrolling through data on his wrist device. He seemed indifferent to the tension in the air, though his clenched jaw suggested otherwise. Kale remained at the edge of the camp, its presence almost ghostly in the dim light. It didn't speak or move much, but its eyes, large and luminous, never left Jake. There was something unsettling about the way it observed him, as if it could see things no one else could. "Do you think he'll actually drink it?" Lisa asked softly, breaking the silence. Emily sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't know. He's stubborn, but even he can't ignore this forever." "What happens if he doesn't take it?" Lisa pressed, her voice tinged with worry. Emily hesitated. Glancing at Kale, "If Kale's right, and I believe they are, the toxin will keep spreading. It'll weaken his body, mess with his mind, and eventually, well, let's just say we need to convince him before it gets that far." Lisa nodded slowly, her expression grim. "We should talk to him again. Maybe he'll listen if we explain how serious this is." Before Emily could respond, a sharp gasp cut through the quiet. Everyone turned to see Jake clutching his head, his face contorted in pain. The vial slipped from his fingers, rolling across the ground as he doubled over, breathing heavily. "Jake!" Emily shouted, rushing to his side. "What's wrong?" "My head," Jake managed, his voice strained. "Feels like it's splitting open." Emily knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Let me check your vitals." "No," Jake snapped, pulling away. "I'm fine. Just give me a second." But he wasn't fine. His skin was clammy, and beads of sweat dotted his forehead. Despite the cool night air, his hands trembled as he tried to steady himself, and his breathing came in short, ragged bursts. Ryan approached cautiously, his usual sarcasm replaced by genuine concern. "Maybe you should take the remedy now, man. Just to be safe." Jake shook his head stubbornly, though his resolve seemed weaker than before. "No, it's probably just stress. I'll be okay." Kale stepped forward, its melodic voice cutting through the chaos. "The toxin has begun to affect your nervous system. Without treatment, the symptoms will worsen rapidly." Jake looked up at Kale, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. For the first time, there was fear in his expression. "How bad are we talking?" Kale's gaze softened, though its tone remained grave. "You may experience fever, hallucinations, and paralysis. If untreated, the toxin will overwhelm your body completely." Jake stared at Kale for a long moment, then glanced at the vial lying forgotten on the ground. His pride warred with his instinct for survival, and for once, the latter seemed to win. Slowly, he reached for the vial, his fingers trembling as he picked it up. "Fine," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I'll try it. But if this makes me worse, I'm blaming all of you." Emily exhaled in relief, helping him sit upright. "It's not going to make you worse. Trust us." Jake hesitated, staring at the shimmering liquid inside the vial. Finally, he uncapped it and took a small sip. The taste was bitter, making him grimace, but he forced himself to swallow. Almost immediately, he slumped back, closing his eyes. "How do you feel?" Emily asked gently. Jake didn't answer right away. Instead, he focused on his breathing, waiting for the remedy to take effect. At first, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the pounding in his head began to subside, replaced by a dull ache. His trembling hands steadied, and the tightness in his chest eased slightly. "It's working," Lisa said, her voice filled with relief. Jake opened his eyes, looking around at the group. "Yeah, I guess it is." Emily smiled faintly, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "See? Told you it would help." Jake didn't return the smile, but the tension in his posture eased somewhat. "Thanks. I guess I owe you one." "Oh, all of us," Ryan quipped, though his tone lacked its usual edge. "Next time, maybe listen when someone tells you a bug bite might kill you." Jake rolled his eyes, but there was no real malice in the gesture. Yeah, lesson learned. Kale watched silently as the humans regrouped, its expression unreadable. After a moment, it spoke, its voice soft but firm. "The remedy will slow the toxin's progress, but it is not a permanent solution. We must continue monitoring him closely. If the symptoms return, we will need to act quickly." Emily nodded, turning to Kale. "What else can we do? Is there another step after this?" "There is," Kale replied, "but it requires accessing a rare compound found deep within the jungle. It is dangerous, and retrieving it will not be easy." "We'll figure it out," Emily said firmly. "For now, let's focus on keeping Jake stable." As the hours passed, Jake's condition stabilized, though he remained pale and weak. He refused to talk much, instead leaning back against a tree and staring blankly into the fire. The others gave him space, knowing he needed time to process what had happened. Even Ryan kept his comments to himself. Sensing that now wasn't the time for jokes, Emily stayed close by, checking Jake's vitals periodically. Each time she did, she noticed subtle improvements. The redness around his wound had faded slightly, and the black veins spreading across his skin seemed less pronounced. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were only buying time. By midnight, the jungle had grown eerily quiet. The usual chirps and rustling sounds were absent, leaving an oppressive stillness in their place. Emily shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around herself. Something about the silence felt unnatural, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Lisa joined her by the fire, handing her a cup of hot tea. "You should rest," Lisa said quietly. "You've been running yourself ragged since this." "Started, I can't," Emily replied, shaking her head. "Not until I know he's out of danger." Lisa hesitated, then placed a comforting hand on Emily's arm. "You're doing everything you can. That's all anyone can ask for." Emily managed a weak smile, though her eyes remained troubled. "I just hope it's enough." Hours later, as the first hints of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Jake stirred. He sat up slowly, wincing as stiffness set into his muscles. The others were asleep, scattered around the camp in various states of exhaustion. Only Emily remained awake, sitting cross-legged by the fire, with her chin resting on her knees. "Hey," Jake said hoarsely, startling her. She turned to face him, her expression softening. "Hey, how are you feeling?" "It's better," he admitted, though his voice was still weak, still sore, but better. "That's good," Emily said, scooting closer. "How's your hand?" Jake glanced down at the wound, which now looked significantly less inflamed. "Looks like your alien potion worked." "It's not mine," Emily corrected gently. "It's Kale's, and I'm glad it helped." Jake fell silent, staring into the fire. After a moment, he spoke, his voice low and hesitant. I wanted to say thanks for pushing me to take it." "I know I wasn't exactly cooperative." Emily smiled faintly. "You don't have to thank me. That's what I'm here for." Jake nodded, though his gaze remained distant. "I guess I got lucky this time. But Kale was right. I underestimated this place. It's different, scarier than I thought." "It's okay to admit that," Emily said softly. "We're all out of our element here, and no one expects you to have all the answers." Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just hate feeling like I'm not in control, you know?" "I get it," Emily replied. "But sometimes letting go of control is the smartest thing you can do." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as the sky lightened and the jungle began to wake up. The others started stirring, stretching, and yawning as they prepared for another day. Kale appeared once more, its presence calming yet commanding. "The toxin has been slowed, but it is not gone," Kale reminded them. "We must retrieve the final compound soon." Jake met Kale's gaze, his earlier defiance replaced by determination. "Then let's get moving, I'm ready." Emily exchanged a glance with Lisa, who nodded in agreement. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The return journey to the camp began under a sky painted with streaks of orange and purple as the alien sun dipped lower on the horizon. The team moved cautiously, their steps slower this time, not just from exhaustion, but also from the weight of what they had endured. Jake walked at the center of the group, his strength gradually returning, though he still leaned heavily on Emily whenever the terrain became uneven. Despite his recovery, the memory of the toxin's grip lingered in his mind, making him quieter than usual as they retraced their path through the rocky terrain. Kale's words echoed in Jake's thoughts. Asterisk, do not waste yours recklessly. For someone who prided himself on being fearless, those words carried an unexpected sting. He glanced at Emily, who was scanning the surroundings with sharp eyes, her medic instincts never resting. She caught his gaze and offered a small, reassuring smile. You're doing better, she said softly, adjusting the strap of her pack. Just don't push yourself too hard. I won't, Jake replied, surprising even himself with how sincere he sounded. Thanks for, well, everything. Emily nodded, brushing off the gratitude with a shrug. That's what I'm here for. Ryan, walking a few paces ahead, glanced over his shoulder and smirked. Yeah, Jake, maybe next time you'll actually listen when someone tells you something's dangerous. Jake rolled his eyes but didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he focused on putting one foot in front of the other, determined to make it back to camp without incident. Lisa brought up the rear, her attention divided between the map on her wrist device and the jungle around them.
Ow.
Every rustle of leaves or distant chirp made her pause, her hand hovering near her weapon. The jungle seemed different, now quieter, darker, as if it were holding its breath. The bioluminescent plants glowed faintly, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. It was beautiful, but there was an underlying tension in the air, a sense that they weren't alone. We should hurry, Lisa said suddenly, her voice low. It's getting late, and we don't want to be out here after dark. No one argued. The thought of spending another night in the jungle wasn't appealing, especially after their encounter with the swarm of insects. They quickened their pace, weaving through the dense foliage with practiced efficiency. Still, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching them. About halfway back to camp, Jake began to feel strange. At first, it was subtle, a slight tingling in his fingertips, like pins and needles. He tried to ignore it, chalking it up to fatigue or lingering effects of the toxin. But as they continued, the sensation spread, crawling up his arms and into his chest. His breathing grew shallow, and a cold sweat broke out across his skin. Hey, he said, stopping abruptly. Something's wrong. Emily turned immediately, her medical instincts kicking in. What is it? Are you feeling sick? Jake shook his head, though his expression was troubled. Not sick. Exactly. It's like, I can't explain it. My body feels weird. Ryan frowned, stepping closer. Weird how? Before Jake could answer, a sharp pain shot through his temples, forcing him to clutch his head. His vision blurred, and for a moment, everything around him seemed to waver, as if reality itself were bending. Then, without warning, the jungle vanished. Jake found himself standing in a vast, shadowy void. The ground beneath his feet was smooth and black, stretching endlessly in every direction. Above him, the sky, if it could be called, that was a swirling mass of dark clouds, crackling with faint flashes of lightning. In the distance, silhouettes moved, their shapes indistinct, but unmistakably humanoid. Where am I? Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. You are within your own mind, a voice replied, deep and resonant. It came from everywhere. And nowhere all at once. Jake spun around, searching for the source of the voice. What do you mean this isn't real? It is as real as you allow it to be, the voice continued. This place reflects your fears, your doubts, your regrets. You have wandered here before, though you may not remember. Jake's heart pounded as the silhouettes drew closer, their movements slow and deliberate. As they approached, their features became clearer, faces he recognized, people from his past. Some were friends, others family members, and a few he hadn't seen in years. Each face carried an expression of disappointment, sadness, or anger. What do you want from me? Jake demanded, backing away instinctively. The figures didn't respond. Instead, they began to whisper, their voices overlapping in a cacophony. of sound. Fragments of memories flooded his mind, arguments he'd had, promises he'd broken, mistakes he'd made. The weight of it all pressed down on him, threatening to crush him. "No," Jake muttered, shaking his head. "This isn't happening. None of this is real." "It is real enough," the voice said again. "These are the shadows you carry. To escape them, you must confront them." Jake clenched his fists, trying to steady himself. "I don't need to confront anything. I've moved on. Have you?" the voice asked, almost mockingly. Or, have you simply buried these truths beneath layers of bravado and denial? The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until Jake could no longer distinguish one voice from another. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the torrent of emotions surging through him. Guilt, shame, regret, it all came rushing back, hitting him like a tidal wave. Back in the jungle, Emily knelt beside Jake, who had collapsed to the ground. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring blankly into the distance. His breathing was rapid and shallow, and his skin was clammy to the touch. "He's hallucinating," Emily said urgently, checking his vitals. "We need to snap him out of—" Lisa crouched beside her, looking worried. "What caused this? Is it the toxin?" "I don't think so," Emily replied, her brow furrowed. "The antidote should have neutralized it. It has to be something else." Ryan stepped forward, his tone grim. Maybe it's side effects from the compound. Or maybe this planet's messing with his head. Kale appeared suddenly, emerging from the shadows as silently as ever. Its large, luminous eyes studied Jake intently. "The toxin may be gone, but its residue lingers in his mind." Ease. "These visions are a manifestation of his inner turmoil." "Inner turmoil?" Ryan repeated. Skeptically, "You're saying this is all in his head?" "In a way, yes," Kale replied. "But that does not make it any less real. He must face what he sees if he wishes to awaken." Emily looked at Kale, her expression desperate. "How do we help him?" "Cannot," Kale said simply. "Only he can break free from his own mind." Jake groaned, his body twitching as if caught in a nightmare. Tears streamed down his face, though his eyes remained vacant. Emily placed a hand on his shoulder, speaking firmly but gently. "Jake, listen to me. You're stronger than whatever you're seeing. Fight it. Come back to us." For a moment there was no response. Then slowly, Jake's fingers curled into fists, his breathing steadying slightly. In the void, the shadows paused, their whispers faltering as Jake forced himself to stand. "You're right," he muttered, his voice trembling, but resolute. "This isn't real, and even if it is, I'm done running from it." The figures surrounding him hesitated, their forms flickering like static. One by one, they began to dissolve, their voices fading into silence. The void brightened, the darkness giving way to light. When Jake opened his eyes again, he was back in the jungle, lying on the ground with Emily leaning over him. "Welcome back," she said, relief washing over her face. Jake blinked, disoriented but alive. "What happened? You tell us?" Ryan said dryly, though his tone lacked its usual edge.
"Ow."
"You scared the hell out of everyone." Jake sat up slowly, rubbing his temples. "I saw things, people, memories I'd rather forget." Emily helped him to his feet, her grip firm, but supportive. "It's okay. You faced it. That's what matters." Kale watched silently, its expression unreadable. After a moment, it spoke. "The mind is a fragile thing, shaped by both experience and perception. What you saw was a reflection of your own fears. Do not let them control you." Jake nodded, his resolve strengthening. "I won't. Not anymore," as the group continued. Their journey back to camp, the jungle felt less oppressive, as if the weight of Jake's hallucinations had lifted not just from him but from the environment itself. The glowing plants pulsed brighter, and the air seemed warmer. Carrying the promise of safety ahead, by the time they reached the clearing where their base camp was set up, the sun or orb had fully set, leaving the jungle bathed in soft, ethereal light. Exhausted but alive, the team settled around the fire pit, sharing quiet words of relief and gratitude. Jake stared into the flames, his thoughts clearer than they had been in years. He knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. Not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. The next morning, the team woke up to find Jake sitting by the fire pit, eating a protein bar and joking with Ryan about their plans for when they returned to Earth. The atmosphere seemed lighter than it had been the previous night, as if Cale's warning had already been forgotten or dismissed. Emily, however, wasn't so quick to let it go. She watched Jake carefully from across the camp, her eyes narrowing as she noticed the faint redness spreading around the edges of his bandaged hand. "Jake," she called out, her voice firm but calm, "can I check your wound again?" He glanced up at her, chewing slowly before responding. "Why? It's fine. Stop worrying so much." "It's not about worrying," Emily said, walking over and crouching beside him. "Cale knows this planet better than we do. If they say the bite is dangerous, we should listen." Jake rolled his eyes, setting his half-eaten protein bar aside. "Look, Em, I get that you're trying to do your job, but seriously, how many times have I told you? I'm fine. Nothing's gonna happen." Ryan, who had been listening quietly, chimed in with a smirk. "Yeah, Emily. Jake's immune system is basically Superman level at this point." Emily shot Ryan a glare, then turned back to Jake. "It's not just about your immune system. This isn't Earth. We don't know how alien toxins work. A could be slower, faster, or even dormant until they suddenly aren't." Jake sighed dramatically, holding up his hand. "Fine, go ahead. Knock yourself out." Reluctantly, Emily unwrapped the bandage, revealing the small puncture wound. At first glance, it didn't look too bad, just a tiny mark surrounded by slightly irritated skin. But as she leaned closer, she noticed something unusual. Tiny black veins were beginning to form around the edges of the wound, spreading outward like cracks on glass. Her heart sank. "This doesn't look right," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. "What?" Jake asked, leaning forward to look. When he saw the discoloration, he shrugged again. "So, it's probably just bruising. It happens. All the time." "No, it's not bruising," Emily said sharply, grabbing her scanner. "This is something else entirely." She ran the device over his hand, frowning as the readings came in. Whatever toxin was in his system was spreading faster than she'd expected. Cale appeared at the edge of the clearing, watching silently as Emily worked. The alien's presence made the rest of the team uneasy, but no one said anything. Finally, Cale stepped forward, its movements graceful and deliberate. "The toxin is progressing," Cale said, its melodic voice cutting through the tension. "You must act quickly if you wish to save him," Jake groaned, throwing his hands up in frustration. "I swear you guys are making way too big a deal out of this."
"I feel fine."
"You won't feel fine for long," Cale replied, its tone uncharacteristically stern. "The toxin will weaken your body, cloud your mind, and eventually shut down your vital systems. Without treatment, survival is unlikely." Emily looked up at Cale, her expression grim. "Is there anything we can do? Any antidote or remedy?" Cale nodded slowly. "There's a plant that grows nearby. Its sap contains compounds capable of neutralizing the toxin. However, it must be prepared correctly, and time is of the essence." "Then let's go get it," Emily said immediately, standing up. "Show us where it is." Jake stood up too, shaking his head. "No way. You're not dragging me into some alien witch doctor routine because of a little bug bite. I'm telling you I'll be fine." Ryan crossed his arms, clearly siding with Jake. "He's got a point. We don't even know if this remedy is safe. What if it makes things worse?" "It won't," Cale said firmly, "but ignoring the problem will." Emily hesitated, torn between respecting Jake's wishes and doing what she believed was best for his health. In the end, her instincts as a medic won out. "Listen, Jake," she said, stepping closer to him. "I know you think you're invincible, but this isn't just about you anymore. If this toxin spreads unchecked, it could put all of us at risk. We need to take this seriously." Jake scowled, clearly annoyed. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. Fine, whatever. Do what you want. But don't come crying to me when your alien potion doesn't work." With that, he stormed off toward his tent, leaving the group to argue amongst themselves. Emily exchanged a worried glance with Lisa, another member of the team who had remained quiet throughout the exchange. "We can't force him to cooperate," Lisa said softly. "But maybe we can prepare the remedy anyway, just in case." Emily nodded. "Let's do it." "Kale, can you show us where to find the plant?" Kale inclined its head slightly. "Follow me. But be cautious, the jungle is unpredictable." The journey to retrieve the plant was tense and exhausting. The jungle seemed alive, almost sentient, as if it was testing them at every turn. Thick vines blocked their path, forcing them to cut through with machetes. Strange creatures darted through the shadows, their glowing eyes watching curiously. Every step felt heavier than the last, but Emily pushed forward, determined to help Jake whether he wanted it or not. After nearly an hour of trudging through the dense foliage, Kale stopped beside a cluster of tall, spindly plants with bright purple leaves. The air around them shimmered faintly, giving off a soft hum that vibrated in Emily's chest. "This is it," Kale said, pointing to the largest plant in the group. "Break off one of the stems and collect the sap. Be careful, it is potent." Emily knelt down, using a small knife to slice through the stem. A thick, golden liquid oozed out, pooling in the palm of her hand. It smelled sweet but carried an underlying tang that made her nose wrinkle. Carefully, she transferred the sap into a vial, sealing it tightly before standing up. "Got it," she said, holding up the vial triumphantly. "Now, how do we prepare it?" Kale explained the process: a mixture of heating the sap and combining it with crushed petals from another nearby flower. It sounded simple enough, but Emily knew better than to underestimate alien chemistry. One wrong move could render the remedy useless or worse. Toxic by the time they returned to camp, the sun, or rather, the massive orange Orbeez, was high in the sky. Jake was lounging against a tree, pretending to ignore the worried glances. The others kept throwing his way. His face was pale, though he tried to hide it behind a cocky grin. "Welcome back," he said mockingly as Emily approached. "Did you have fun playing jungle doctor?" Ignoring his sarcasm, Emily held up the vial of sap. "We brought back the ingredients for the remedy, just in case." Jake snorted. "Yeah, sure. Because I totally need alien juice to survive." Bug bite. Emily didn't respond. Instead, she set to work preparing the mixture according to Kale's instructions. The process was meticulous, requiring precise measurements and timing. As she worked, Lisa stayed close by, offering assistance whenever needed. Together, they managed to create a small vial of golden liquid that shimmered faintly in the light. "There," Emily said, holding up the finished product. "Done." Kale inspected the vial briefly before nodding in approval. "This should counteract the toxin, but it must be administered soon." Emily turned to Jake, holding out the vial. "Here, drink this." Jake stared at the vial like it was poison. "Absolutely not. No way am I drinking that." "It's not poison," Emily snapped, losing patience. "It's medicine, and if you don't take it, you're going to regret it." "I'm not taking orders from you," Jake shot back, crossing his arms defiantly. Ryan stepped forward, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder. "Maybe we should give him some space. He's stubborn, but he's also an adult. If he wants to refuse treatment, that's his choice." Emily glared at Ryan, then turned back to Jake. "This isn't about control, Jake. This is about keeping you alive. Why are you being so reckless?" "Because I'm tired of everyone treating me like I'm some fragile kid," Jake shouted, standing up abruptly. "I've survived everything life has thrown at me so far, and I don't need some alien concoction to prove I'm strong enough to handle this." The argument escalated quickly, with voices rising and tempers flaring. Kale watched silently from the sidelines, its expression unreadable. Finally, Lisa stepped in, raising her hands in a calming gesture. Okay, everyone stop," she said loudly. "Fighting isn't going to solve anything. Jake, you don't have to drink it right now, but at least keep it nearby in case you change your mind. And Emily, maybe we can focus on monitoring his condition instead of pushing him." Emily hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but if he starts showing symptoms, we're administering it whether he likes it or not." Jake smirked, clearly pleased with himself. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Doc. As the day wore on, the tension in the camp remained palpable. Jake continued to insist he felt fine, though Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She kept a close eye on him, noting subtle changes in his behavior, his occasional wincings. The way he rubbed his temples as if fighting off a headache, a slight tremor in his hands when he thought no one was looking. By evening, the glow of the bioluminescent plants cast an ethereal light over the camp. The team gathered around the fire pit, eating dinner in near silence. Even Jake seemed quieter than usual, picking at his food without much enthusiasm. When Emily caught him staring blankly into the flames, she felt a pang of dread. "Jake," she said softly, sitting beside him, "how are you feeling?" At her, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Still alive, see?" Emily studied his face, searching for any sign of pain or discomfort. "If anything feels wrong, if you start feeling sick, you need to tell me." "Okay." Jake tightened his grip on the scanner as he pushed through the thick underbrush of the alien jungle. The air was humid, almost suffocating, and every step forward felt like wading through soup. Bioluminescent plants glowed faintly around him, casting eerie shadows that danced across the ground. It was beautiful, but Jake wasn't here for sightseeing. He was here to get the job done. The team had been sent to this uncharted planet to scout for resources. Earth's reserves were dwindling. Planets like this one held the promise of untapped wealth minerals, energy sources, maybe even new forms of life that could be studied or exploited. Jake didn't care much about any of that. It was just another paycheck. He'd been on dozens of missions like this before, always coming back with enough credits to keep living comfortably. Nothing too exciting ever happened. Behind him, Emily adjusted her backpack, her eyes scanning the surroundings cautiously. She was the medic of the group, and while she wasn't exactly thrilled about being stuck in the middle of an alien jungle, she took her role seriously. Her gaze darted between Jake and the glowing foliage, searching for anything unusual. Unusual, however, was a relative term on a planet where everything seemed out of the ordinary. "Stay sharp," Emily said, her voice low but firm. "We don't know what's lurking out here." Jake rolled his eyes without turning around. "Relax him. If something tries to bite me, I'll just shrug it off like last time." Emily frowned at his dismissive tone. Last week, during their previous mission, Jake had gotten stung by some kind of alien bug. Instead of letting her treat it properly, he'd laughed it off, saying his immune system could handle whatever the universe threw at him. And sure enough, he hadn't shown any serious symptoms afterward, but Emily knew better than to rely on luck. Every planet was different, and what might have been harmless last week could easily turn deadly today. The jungle grew denser as they ventured deeper, forcing them to slow down. Strange noises echoed around them, clicks, chirps, and rustling, sounds that made it hard to tell whether they were alone. Ryan, another member of the team, brought up the rear, occasionally checking the map on his wrist device. He was quieter than usual, probably because he hated jungles almost as much as he hated bugs. "Anything interesting yet?" Ryan called out after a long stretch of silence. "Not unless you count glowing mushrooms fascinating," Jake replied. Dryly, he stopped suddenly, crouching down to inspect something near the base of a tree. "Wait, hold on. I think I found something." Emily moved closer, peering over his shoulder. At first glance, it looked like a cluster of small, insect-like creatures clinging to the bark. They were no bigger than a thumbnail, with translucent wings that shimmered in the dim light. Their bodies pulsed faintly, as though they were alive with electricity. "What are those things?" Emily asked, keeping her distance. "No idea," Jake said, leaning in closer. "But they're weird-looking, so they've got to be worth checking." Out! Before anyone could stop him, Jake reached out and poked one of the creatures with the tip of his scanner. The reaction was instantaneous. The tiny insect let out a high-pitched screech and lunged at his hand, sinking its razor-sharp mandibles into his skin. Jake yelped and jerked his hand back, shaking it violently to dislodge the creature. It flew off into the darkness, leaving behind a small puncture wound that began to bleed immediately. "Oh, great," Ryan muttered, rolling his eyes. Another "I'm invincible" moment from Jake. Emily knelt beside Jake, already pulling supplies from her pack. "Let me see your hand," she said sharply. "It's fine," Jake insisted, examining the wound himself. "It barely even hurts." "That's not the point," Emily snapped, grabbing his wrist to get a better look. "We don't know what's in its saliva. For all we know, it could be venomous." Jake pulled his hand away, standing up with a smirk. "Come on, Em. You worry too much. Remember last week? That sting didn't kill me, and neither will this." Emily opened her mouth to argue, but stopped herself when she saw the stubborn look on his face. Arguing with Jake was like trying to reason with a brick wall. He never listened until it was too late. Instead, she sighed and shoved a small antiseptic wipe into his hand. "At least clean it," she said. "And if you start feeling sick, tell me right away." Jake shrugged and wiped the wound half-heartedly before tossing the wipe aside. "Yeah, got it." They continued their trek through the jungle, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in her stomach. Something about those insects felt wrong. They weren't like the other creatures they'd encountered on this planet. They were smarter, more aggressive. There was no telling what kind of toxins they carried. As the hours passed, the group managed to collect several samples of plant and mineral deposits, marking promising locations on their maps. Despite the tension caused by Jake's recklessness, they were making progress. By the time they decided to head back to base camp, the sun, or rather, the massive orange orb that served as this planet's star, was beginning to dip below the horizon. Back at the makeshift camp, the team gathered around the glowing fire pit, reviewing their findings and discussing their next steps. The mood was lighter now, the earlier incident mostly forgotten. Jake lounged against a crate, nursing a cup of rehydrated coffee while cracking jokes about how he'd single-handedly saved the mission by discovering the glowing mushrooms. "You're lucky you didn't lose a finger," Emily teased, though her tone carried a hint of lingering concern. "Lucky? Nah," Jake replied with a grin. "It's called skill. Maybe you should take notes." Before Emily could respond, a rustling sound came from the edge of the clearing. Everyone froze, their heads snapping toward the source of the noise. Slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, slender being with smooth, iridescent skin and large almond-shaped eyes. Its presence was both mesmerizing and unsettling, radiating an aura of calm authority. "This is Kale," Emily whispered, recognizing the alien from earlier encounters. Kale had been observing the humans from afar, occasionally offering advice or warnings about the dangers of the planet. While some members of the team were wary of the alien, Emily trusted Kale's intentions. Kale approached cautiously, stopping a few feet away from the group. Its voice, when it spoke, was soft and melodic, translated into English through a small device attached to its neck. "One of you has been injured," Kale said, its gaze locking onto Jake's bandaged hand. "You must allow me to examine the wound." Jake raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Oh, come on. Are you guys still worried about this?" "I'm fine." Emily shot him a warning glare before addressing Kale. He was bitten by one of those insects near the trees. "We cleaned the wound, but we're not sure if it's safe." Kale stepped closer, extending a delicate hand toward Jake. "Please, let me see." For a moment, Jake hesitated, his bravado wavering under Kale's steady gaze. Finally, he relented, holding out his hand. Kale examined the wound carefully, its expression growing increasingly grave. "This bite is dangerous," Kale said after a pause. "The toxin it carries can spread quickly through your system. Without treatment, it may prove fatal." Jake snorted, pulling his hand back. "Fatal, right? Like I haven't heard that before? Look, I appreciate the concern, but I'll be fine. Trust me, I've dealt with worse." Kale's eyes narrowed slightly, though its tone remained calm. "You underestimate the complexity of this world. This is not like the injuries you have faced in the past. Ignoring my warning may cost you dearly." The rest of the team exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to respond. Emily looked ready to intervene, but Jake cut her off with a dismissive wave. "Thanks for the heads up, Doc," he said, standing up and brushing dirt off his pants. "But I think I'll take my chances." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Kale standing silently in the center of the camp. The alien watched him go, its expression unreadable. Whatever thoughts it had, it kept them to itself for now. The campfire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across the clearing. The team sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Jake leaned back against a crate, staring into the flames with an intensity that suggested he was still processing everything that had happened. Emily sat nearby, keeping a close eye on him while pretending not to. Lisa and Ryan were busy organizing supplies, though their movements were slower than usual, weighed down by exhaustion. Kale stood at the edge of the clearing, its presence both calming and enigmatic. It watched the humans silently, as if waiting for something or someone to speak first. Finally, Jake broke the quiet. So, he began, his voice low but steady. "What now?" Emily glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "Now, we rest. We've been through a lot, and we all need time to recover." Ryan snorted, tossing a protein bar wrapper into the fire. "Recover? I don't think I'll ever recover from this place. Every step feels like a death trap." "It's dangerous," Kale interjected, its melodic voice cutting through the tension. "But it is also alive. This planet reacts to those who tread upon it. Your actions here matter." Jake frowned, turning to look at Kale. "What do you mean alive? You're saying the planet has some kind of consciousness?" "A way, yes," Kale replied. "It is not like your machines or even your minds. It is older, deeper. It senses imbalance and responds accordingly." Lisa tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. "So, when those insects attacked us earlier, was that the planet defending itself?" "Not exactly," Kale said. The creatures act on instinct, but their behavior is influenced by the planet's rhythms. Disturbances, like your present scan, disrupt those rhythms." Ryan crossed his arms, clearly skeptical. "Great, so we're basically walking around upsetting nature's balance." "Fantastic. It's not just about you," Kale continued. "Every living thing affects this world. The key is understanding how to coexist without causing harm." Jake rubbed his temples, feeling a headache creeping in. Coexisting sounds nice in theory, but how are we supposed to do that when we don't even know the rules? "That is why I am here," Kale said simply. "To guide you, to teach you." Emily leaned forward, her interest evident. "Teach us what? How to survive? Or something more?" "Both," Kale replied. "Survival is only the beginning. True understanding requires patience and respect." The conversation lulled, leaving the group to ponder Kale's words. Jake stared into the fire again, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on being self-reliant, on trusting his instincts above all else. But the events of the past few days had shaken that confidence. For the first time, he realized how much he didn't know and how much he needed others to fill in the gaps. Later that night, after the others had retreated to their tents, Jake stayed by the fire, unable to sleep. The jungle was eerily quiet, the usual hum of bioluminescent plants muted under the cover of darkness. He felt restless, his thoughts swirling like storm clouds. Kale approached silently, sitting cross-legged beside him. Jake glanced over, surprised, but not startled. There was something comforting about Kale's presence, even if it was alien and unfamiliar. "You should rest," Kale said softly. "Your body still needs time to heal." "I'm fine," Jake replied automatically, then caught himself. With a small sigh, he added, "Well, mostly fine. Just thinking about what?" Kale asked, its large eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Jake hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "About what you said earlier. About coexisting. About respect." Kale nodded slowly. "Respect is earned, not given freely. It requires effort and humility." "I get that," Jake admitted. "But it's hard. On Earth, I never really had to think about stuff like that. It was always about getting the job done, surviving another day." Here he trailed off, gesturing vaguely. "At the jungle around them, here, it's different. Everything feels connected." "It is," Kale confirmed. "This planet is a web, and every action sends ripples through it. Some ripples are small, others vast. Ignoring them does not make them disappear. Jake ran a hand through his hair, frustration creeping into his tone. I want to understand. I really do. But it's like trying to learn a new language without a dictionary. How am I supposed to figure this out? One step at a time, Kale replied. You have already taken the first step by acknowledging your ignorance. That is more than many would dare to do. Jake chuckled bitterly. Yeah, well, almost. Dying tends to put things in perspective. There is wisdom in survival, Kale said. But true growth comes from learning, not merely enduring. They sat in silence for a while, the crackling fire the only sound between them. Jake found himself studying Kale, noticing details he hadn't before, the subtle shimmer of its skin, the way its hands rested gently on its knees, the calmness in its gaze. Despite their differences, there was something profoundly human about Kale's demeanor. Why are you helping us? Jake asked suddenly. You don't owe us anything. Hell, we probably don't deserve it. Kale tilted its head slightly as if considering the question. Because your survival may depend on ours. Because ignorance leads to destruction. And I would see this world preserved. Jake nodded slowly, absorbing the answer. Fair enough. But what happens if we screw up anyway? What if we can't learn fast enough? Then the consequences will be yours to bear, Kale said bluntly. But failure is not inevitable. Not yet. Jake exhaled sharply, leaning back against the crate. Guess I'd better start paying attention, huh? Kale inclined its head slightly. Yes, and perhaps you will find that understanding brings more than survival, it brings purpose. The next morning, the team woke to find the jungle transformed once again. The glowing plants pulsed brighter than ever, their colors shifting subtly as if responding to the rising sun orb. The air felt lighter, carrying a faint floral scent that none of them had noticed before. Emily emerged from her tent, stretching and yawning. She spotted Jake sitting by the fire, looking unusually contemplative. Morning, she said, joining him. How are you feeling? Better, Jake replied, offering a small smile. Still tired, but clearer, I guess. Emily studied him for a moment, noting the subtle change in his demeanor. Good, that's good. Lisa and Ryan appeared soon after, both looking equally groggy but functional. Kale was already standing at the edge of the clearing, gazing out. Into the jungle? What's the plan for today? Ryan asked, scratching the back of his neck. We stay cautious, Emily said firmly. We've learned enough to know this place isn't forgiving. Stick together, keep our eyes open, and listen to Kale. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Listen to Kale? Since when did we start taking orders from aliens? Since they saved all? Our lives, Emily shot back, her tone leaving no room for argument. Jake chimed in, surprising everyone. She's right. If Kale says something, we pay attention. No arguments. Well, Ryan blinked, clearly taken aback by Jake's sudden agreement. All right, fine. Whatever you say, fearless leader. Kale turned to face the group, its expression unreadable. Today we explore further. There is much to learn, and time is fleeting. The team exchanged glances, then nodded in unison. They packed up their gear quickly, ensuring they had enough supplies for the day. As they prepared to leave, Jake lingered by the fire pit, staring at the glowing embers. You ready? Emily asked, stepping up beside him. Jake nodded, grabbing his pack. Yeah, let's go. The journey deeper into the jungle was unlike anything they had experienced before. The terrain shifted constantly, from dense thickets to open clearings filled with towering, crystalline trees. Strange, bird-like creatures soared overhead, their feathers shimmering like rainbows. The air vibrated faintly, as if humming with energy. At one point, they stumbled upon a wide river, its waters glowing faintly blue. Fish-like creatures darted beneath the surface, their scales reflecting the light in mesmerizing patterns. Lisa knelt by the edge, scooping up a handful of water. It's warm, she said, marveling at the sensation. And it smells clean. Drink it, Kale instructed. It is safe. The team hesitated, but Jake stepped forward first, cupping his hands and taking a sip. The water tasted sweet, almost floral, and left a pleasant warmth in his chest. One by one, the others followed suit as they continued along the riverbank. Kale pointed out various plants and creatures, explaining their roles in the ecosystem. Some were medicinal, others dangerous. Each piece of information added to the growing puzzle of the planet's complexity. "This place is incredible," Lisa murmured, her voice filled with awe. "It's like a living library." Kale agreed. "But knowledge alone is not enough. Understanding must come from within." Jake nodded, his earlier doubts giving way to a newfound determination. He knew they still had much to learn, but for the first time he felt hopeful. Together, they could navigate this strange, beautiful world, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to belong in it.